Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Foreclosure Deals Coach podcast. I am your host and Foreclosure Deals Coach, Donny Coram, and this is the show where we discuss how to find, figure, fund, fix, and flip a foreclosure deal with a minimum profit of $25,000 or more. Listen, you can't talk about flipping deals without talking about the construction side of flipping. And all of this comes down to the system. Like the construction piece has the most moving parts, but if you don't have a system in place to be scalable, it is very difficult to grow any business, particularly a foreclosure flipping business like the people who watch this show are looking to create. With that in mind, I am honored and proud to have a guest on the show, Mr. Joshua Gillow, who's going to talk to us more about how he scaled his systems in the construction space to fill out outdoor landscaping and the systems that went into that. Without further ado, let's jump on the stage with Joshua Gillow. What's going on, baby? How you doing?
Good, Donnie. Excited to be here, man. I love your energy.
Oh man, people say that all the time. I don't know if it's maybe the coffee. I don't know. It's not I promise you that, but I feel this is just how I talk. You know, there's an energy thing. But thanks for bringing it up. I appreciate it. Let's hop back in right away, Josh. Tell me a little bit more. Tell the listeners more about what you do with Yes Express and kind of your background and how it applies to the real estate world to some degree.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I grew up in a garden center with my parents. They started the business. They were business owners first in their generations. And we learned a lot of stuff. My brother, he's about 18 months younger than me.
Okay.
And we learned everything we knew. We cut our teeth there working 7 days a week and not getting paid for it. Like, that's just what it was. You work on a farm and that's what it was. You had plenty of work and you were never bored, but you never had free time. I didn't even know what free time was until I was an adult. But anyway, point is that's it instills a work ethic in you, Donnie. That's it's wild. But anyway, so did that and then started around age 18, started their own landscaping company to get out and help people because people were coming in the garden center and said, "Hey, can you guys install this stuff?" And I'll never forget the first time a client offered us $1,000 a day to work on their property. I was like, "Whoa!" And I'm thinking like, there's 7 days in a week, Donnie. Like, I'm going to be rich. It's amazing, right? So, I mean, just to put it in context, we used to go to a local farm and work for $20 a day to bale hay in 100-degree weather. And we were happy with that because it was money. We didn't have that before. So anyway,
that makes sense.
Fast forward that and started the business, growing that. Started out with nothing, growing it up. And eventually, after about 15 years of doing a design build model, we decided to part ways. My brother and I had a bit of a falling out and decided to part ways. And I started my own company. For the first time in my life, I was completely on my own. Like, there was no one else around. It was just me. And I was like, oh man, I hope I can make this work.
Sure.
And what I realized very quickly is that the new model, which is more of a design manage model, imagine like a designing general contractor, right? Okay. That I could scale faster. But the problem was I didn't have any systems. I got to about $1 million in revenue and I'm like, all the wheels are falling off the bus. I'm like at 80 hours a week. I am done. I can't scale this thing. And and I read a book called E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And that book shifted my mindset and said, wait a minute here, we got to build this bakery, right? Sarah's Bakery, we got to build a bakery. And I'm thinking, wow, okay, cool. So we started doing that. I started building systems around that. I hired my, at the time, secretary. She came in, became my director of operations quickly. I fired my ass as fast as possible. Didn't know that's what I was doing, but fired myself. And eventually then hired a designer and a project manager who took over. And now those two run the entire company. We do millions in revenue a year and they take care of everything. I'm there just to be entertainment at this point. So with that being said, right, one thing I did learn along my journey is that you can't keep going from hand to mouth. I watched my parents go from, not paycheck to paycheck, but, basically season to season in the outdoor living kind of garden center environment. And the summers were great, big and fat, if you will. And come winter, man, you were scraping for food. So couldn't do it, man. Couldn't do it anymore. Like, we got to do this. Like, we got to build this as a 12-month cycle. So we figured that part out, but really what I was mostly focusing on, like, if I can put monies away, a percentage, 10, 20, 30% of revenues and invest it in a long-term cash flow producing outset, which I was not born with this information. I was watching, successful people doing this. And I'm like, how do I get mailbox money? Everybody keeps talking about this. And my mailbox just wasn't producing nothing more than bills. And I said, all right, well, the only way that's going to happen is by taking the bull by the horn. So we had my wife and I, we lived in a small cottage on a lake when we first got married. It's about 750 square feet. And when we said we want to start a family, we said, we're actually going to get a little bit bigger house. And I was like, we'll sell this one and we'll get that one. And she says, well, you know what? Why don't we rent this house out? And I said,
Well,
I don't like that sounds cool. Like I'm a landlord now. It's an
sure,
ego thing.
sure.
Like if this is amazing. Until it wasn't, Donnie, until I had tenants, until I didn't pay, until I trashed a place, until the ambulance and cops were there, until I had to find new people and all. I had no systems. I had no plans for that business at all. Brand new. And I'm like, man, I got to do something about this.
Yes.
So anyway, 15 years of love-hate relationship with that building. I wanted to sell it so many times.
Mm-hmm.
And she kept saying, you can't sell our first house. You can't. I'm like, then you manage it, right? We were just
You said
breaking even.
it's your problem.
Exactly. Just breaking even, just kind of floating along. And then a friend showed up one day and said, hey, I have this opportunity to start buying more real estate. I know you want more cash flow, without a lot of, time involved. Are you interested? I said, what are you talking about? She goes, well, there's some opportunity to buy a lot of different, apartments, like properties, right?
Okay.
And I was like, nope, sorry, nope, no more. I have one. I hate it. I will never do this again. I am not a landlord. I'm going to sell that thing. She goes, what if you had a property manager and that property manager took care of finding all the people, took care of all the rents, took care of all the maintenance, took care of all those things.
So
and all you had to be is an investor. And I'm like, sign me up. How many can I buy? But the problem was, Donnie, I didn't know how to do any of this. I didn't know what Burr was. I didn't know what a hard money lender was. I had to Google all these things. I'm like, what are these things, right? So we eventually, her and I got into a couple of deals together. And then I was like, wait a minute here. Like, I only knew how to do one thing. I was a one-trick pony.
Yes.
I wasn't like, a lot of guys are like, I know all these different real estate. I knew one thing, Burr. That was it.
Right.
That's all I knew. So with that being said, we started buying. And then I went out and we set up different LLCs. I started buying my wife and then with different business partners. And we own 50% or more of every door. And in that 9-month period, we went from 1 unit to 67 single family units. So it went quick. And the crazy part was, it was wild. It was one of the wildest rides, right, in my life. The crazy part was I was really good at finding the deals. I was really good at putting out, and I had a business partner that helped me through this. Mentor was huge. My one business partner, Scott, he mentored me through all of this because I didn't know what I was doing. He's like, hey, Josh, what do you think of this one? And I looked at the apartment. It's like, that looks good. He goes, did you realize you need flood insurance? I'm like, no. He goes, it's next to a river. You need to look for those things, right? And
Sure.
he'd give me enough leash so I could go and be dangerous. And then he would reel me back. And I started to learn with him. And we put me under his wing. And we learned together. And he taught me a ton. And in that, I then got the idea I could do the one thing and crank through it and just grabbed all these units, which was great. The problem was that during that process, I ran out of money. Yep. Right? I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm out of cash. I don't know what to do. And then so my business partner, Scott, he's like, I got this guy that'll do hard money for us. And I'm like, what's hard money? That sounds like I'm going to go out like behind the dumpster at McDonald's. This guy's going to hand me a briefcase and I'm going to have to watch these. Yes. A gun, right? I'm thinking like some mobster type thing, organized crime. And so the next thing you know, we're borrowing money at like 11, 12%. I'm like, dude, this is insane. I'm like, why are we paying so much? He taught me something I'll never forget. He's like, dude, right now it's about controlling the asset. You won't make money year one, but long-term over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, whatever you're going to hold that asset for, you will make money, but you need to control the asset first. And if you got to pay for that, then you got to pay for that. So we did that and we ran him out of money. I was like, he's like, I have no more. I don't have any more. So we actually stopped at 67 because of that. And then the realization set in, Donnie. The realization was, okay, I have all this, I have millions out in hard money. I got to set this up in long-term debt. And I had one bank that might entertain us. Right? I'm thinking, we got 12 months and I feel like the world caving in. I'm like, we need to get all this into long-term. So man, that was probably one of the most stressful times in my life. The probably 6-8 months of moving out of hard money into long-term debt and just managing and juggling banks and then setting up S corp structures so it looks like I'm making money because I'm a business owner, all of this stuff. But eventually, after roughly a 2-year span, I was into all long-term. Everything was balanced, and we started to now, work on each unit to make sure we're getting maximum returns. And so, it's been one hell of a wild journey. But
there's so much to unpack there, Josh. I don't even want to get started. But one of the takeaways I got from that was the system. I have the foreclosure profit system. People come to me with the idea of finding, fixing, funding, fixing, and flipping a deal. I got that wrong in my program. I managed to botch that, but. The process, you have to have a process, right? And you You were building a system in real time and had to find out, okay, this is how we locate deals, right? Obviously,
Yep.
there's a process and deal analysis, making sure it was a good deal. You quickly went to hard money to fund the deals to figure that out. And then you
Yep.
had to fix these units up, presumably, right?
Yep.
And then in your case, you were flipping them into longer term financing, right? But you had a
That's right.
process that you followed. What would you say to a new investor trying to get in who's like, well, I just want to do a deal so bad? Do you think the importance is the process first, or just jump in? What would you advise somebody who went through your thing? Do you wish you had taken more time to plan out the process before you got to that point?
I didn't know how to plan out a process, dude. Like I was just getting into this thing. I'm the
Yep.
kind of guy that jumps off a cliff and I actually make the parachute on the way down, right? Because you don't have a choice when you're in there and everything is against you when it comes to like all these things that need to be done, like for instance, getting out of hard money into long term and all that. I didn't have a choice. I had to win.
You had to
And
figure it
that
out.
doesn't you have to figure it out. That you don't have the relaxation of like, maybe I'll get to it tomorrow. Like I do it sometimes. I get a little bit sidetracked, or I chase shiny objects at times, right? Or I get to a point where I'm just not that's focused, and I'm like, I don't have a choice. My family's livelihood, my family's everything relies on me winning and making sure this works and making sure I set up the networks in the system. So I didn't have a choice. I had to make it work. And in that, I compressed decades into days, right? When it comes down to that effectively. Now, long term, what really helped is to get adapted and adopted into someone else's system. If you're out there just getting started and you don't have the systems, well,
Yeah,
for
that's
me
just
to
it.
work, yeah, get directly into somebody who already has them. For us, it was the
And here we are.
property management company, right? And it's
Right.
like, hey, you guys already have systems. I'm just going to buy. I am the hunter. I go out and I hunt and I kill. I drag it home. You butcher it and cook it. This
Yes.
is what that I knew my role and I stayed in my lane.
I love
That's
that.
what was important,
I love
right?
that.
So I wasn't trying to do everything.
Right. Well, and that's the key to a system is you can't do everything. When you're building a system,
Yeah,
you realize very early on, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses. What I love
yeah,
about the system I've created for my clients is because I did the same thing, doing
yeah.
47 flips in a year, you nailed it. Like you're in that hunter mentality. You just got to go, 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 figure this out. We'll get through it. We'll get through it. But then you realize it's exhausting. You're running a
Yeah.
capital, right? Everything kind of goes wrong if the system's not being designed. Here you are 15 years later, now understanding the process a lot better than you did when you started. But obviously,
Oh
had
yeah.
you bought into a system like people buy franchises, like you buy a McDonald's franchise because they have a system already in place, right?
Yep.
You developed a system that's worked great for you, but buying into a system can save time, but more importantly, stress and effort, right? Would you agree with that? Like having some degree of
100%.
framework along the way. But I love that you did it. I mean, and you talk about family as your motivation. You have to have
Mhm.
something that's driving you, right? For me, it's my
Yes.
wife and my kids as well. We know as the men of the household, we got to do big things. So we're willing to rush through it. But there is a way to avoid some of the stress along the way and kind of develop a process before you get going. We just didn't know that when we got going, right?
Yep, absolutely did. And I wish I could have gone back and bought a system up front, and be like, hey, if I can go in and learn how to do this first instead of just because there was a lot of waste during the time. I was putting way too much time in and getting way too little out, even though it seems like a lot after 9 months of acquisition. But
Yes.
it's still, if I could go back, there was a lot of things that I would have done differently and I would have been much more efficient in that.
Yes.
But again, I didn't have the system. I was just doing a ready, fire, aim mentality. That's what I lived back in those days, right? It was just ready, fire, aim, ready, fire, ready, aim, go, right? That's all it
Right.
was just get it moving so I don't get
Yes.
in a state of procrastination. So with that being said, now looking back, I'd be like, all right, well, I would actually hire somebody to teach me how to do it, and then I would go do it. But that wasn't the way I did it back then.
Wasn't available, right? And the
Yeah,
reality is these systems are just starting to become more proficient. You look at,
yeah,
the advent of, the internet's been huge for multiple reasons, but now
yeah,
the reality is having access to such a system. Hey, I'm trying to do this very specific thing. Finding
yeah,
somebody to coach you on that was nearly impossible. There's a
yeah,
seminar environment. Today, it's readily available. There's coaching programs for literally anything out there. In my
yeah.
case, I'm teaching foreclosure flipping, and my foreclosure profit system is focused on just that. But you are really working into uncharted waters because did you have an exit strategy? Did you have a BHAG, a crazy end goal? And do you have one now? What's the exit strategy for Josh? How do you end game this?
Yeah, so during this time, having that mentor Scott with me, under his wing, teaching me was like that system because he understood stuff. He comes from banking; it was much easier
Sure.
than not having it. So it was like a kind of a system that he had that I was learning. Like he was trying to help me and grow. He wanted to teach me how to fish, not just give me a fish, if
I
you
love
will.
that.
So yeah, and with that, really helped that a lot. But longer term, dude, the big driver was in my world in outdoor living, building decks, pools, patios, all that kind of stuff for almost 30 years now. we are so seasonal. Like there is such
Mhm.
seasonality, and I can't stand that. And you know what? Our what we offer to the world is a nice to have. So if economies change, people cut this stuff out. And then
Sure.
we're like, I got a family to feed. I've got a legacy to leave. I want to build, a really amazing life. And I can't do that if I've got this seasonality problem. So I
Sure.
said, well, real estate's a great way to take monies that I've been collecting and storing and saving and put it into something that's long term that when one goes up, the other one goes down. There's like a vice versa, where the one stays high and the other one moves up and down. So the construction company feeds the real estate side. The
Yes.
profits of one feed into the other. So instead of it being going out and buying another boat or a bigger house or all this crap that doesn't make any sense, invest that into cash flow producing assets, right? And things that have long-term appreciation, depreciation. You know the whole story, right? So, and I'm like, okay, this is cool. So my bigger BHAG was like, you know what? I had a neighbor across the street, Donnie. His name was Bob, and he was in his 70s when I first met him. Him and his wife moved in, and we were sitting over in his garage one day drinking a Keystone Light. He loved Keystone Lights. I don't know why, but he loved Keystone Lights. And so we're sitting in his garage and we're chatting, and he says, I retired at 56 years old. And I
Okay.
looked at him. I'm like,
Good
how
for
is
you.
that possible? I'm like, how's that possible? He's like, yeah, I worked. He was in the army, and then he got a pension, and then he went and worked for a big steel company, and he got some monies there, and so he's like, you know what, I don't have to work anymore. And I'm thinking he's in his 70s at the time, but at
Sure.
56, I'm like, I've never heard of anybody doing that before.
Sure.
I was like, I work on a farm, dude. You work until you die. Like the whole idea of
Right.
stopping or not
Yeah.
having to worry about money was like, what?
It's full
So
to most people.
anyway, he sat there talking to me about how I could do biweekly payments on my home to pay it off and save the interest on it. And how, like, he started just giving me some of these old fashioned ways that he got to where he got to. And I was like, it started opening up a story loop in my head. And I started thinking, how could I do that? How could I retire at 50? If he can do it at 56, I'm even more driven than he is. I'm like, how can I make it at 50? And at the time, I was about 35. And I'm
Okay.
thinking, how can I do it by the time I'm 50? And so I just started asking that question. That's where I really went on this big, mindset growth journey to figure
Yes.
this question out. So anyway, then I go to my financial advisor and I'm like, hey, dude, we're putting in X amount a month, and some of that we just moved into real estate and all that. I was like, so how can I get to retirement at 50, my wife and I? And he looked and he's like, here's what you need to invest. And I'm like, okay, cool. How about 45? If that's all I got to do for 50, what about 45? He shows me and he's like, yeah, this is going to be a big stretch for you. And I'm like, watch me. Just give me a challenge. Watch me.
I love
Right.
that.
Yeah. And then I said to him, I said, you know what? 45 seems impossible. I wanted at 43. And you know why? Donnie, because financially free at 43 rhymes. That's why I want it. And you know what? My wife and I did it. We did it.
Hey, good for you. And the thing is, it's about mindset. It's about you have to believe
100%.
it's possible. Then you got to support that with actual numbers and evidence
Yeah.
of how you can make it work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And a lot of people come to me on a lot of what I do is mental. It's about the
Yeah.
coaching game. It's like it's not rocket science. Buy house low, sell house high, fix it in between, right? But if
Yeah.
you don't believe that there's a number that can retire you at 43, if you don't believe there's a path you can take, you're going to do what most people do, which is go through their whole life believing there's no way to get to that result. The key is
That's
you
right.
got to produce a lot of income in a short period of time, as opposed to a lot of income over a long period of time stretched out.
Yeah.
So you really
Yeah.
compress that. You built a system to do that. Today, you're still doing the outdoor landscaping business. I mean, obviously, you're
Oh, yeah.
financially free in a lot of ways, but you're doing the outdoor business. How do people interact with you on that? I know you work with a lot of construction guys looking to expand their outdoor living construction businesses.
Well, yeah, I do. So we still work directly with homeowners and the construction practice, the design manage, and my team runs all of that. They're blessed beyond like they're gifted beyond anything I ever was.
I love that.
And I'm just there to be entertained and to be the leader in that group and to just talk through it and help them solve problems like that. That's my role
Love
as more the visionary than anything, right? And then so with that extra time that I have now, I started a consulting company because once you get to a point where money is not really the main focus anymore, you're out of survival into thriving.
Yes.
Once you get past that shift, all of a sudden it's about service. It's about how can I help as many people because you know
Absolutely.
what? The money doesn't matter after a while. You're like, look, I can buy whatever I want. I don't have to worry about, any of this stuff. I'm like, so if that's the case, what is life like when money is the main focus? Coming from a farmer who
Mm-hmm.
didn't have any money growing up, and I'm like, what is it like? It's taken a gigantic mindset shift for me to
Mm-hmm.
now stop and not think like, hey, we need to do this or we're going to starve. I've
Yes.
had that so deep down in my soul. So now for the last few years is unpacking that and being like, no, it's okay. Now, the bigger question is if we're going from survival to thriving, how many more people can we bring with us? Because the money didn't matter. What mattered was what really fulfilled my soul
Yes,
and brought joy and fulfillment was seeing others win,
I
right?
love
And
it.
helping others. And that's really where everything shifted. Now my time is spent figuring out how to help other people win. So that's why we started Yes Express, and to be able to help outdoor living hardscapers and landscapers, get to yes with less stress through better communication and
Right.
sales systems. The same sales systems that we're running in our other company that have been just unbelievable for years. We're now
Love
teaching
that.
others how to do it. So it's just such a beautiful way, because when you give back, that's truly when you grow.
And it's so true. And I think I'm at the same spot. After flipping as many houses as I did, money was not really the problem anymore. Now the problem really became about how do I give back, use that education, another
Yeah.
thing. You have a system that people can step into with Yes Express
Yep.
where they can expand that business. And there's a podcast I can tune into. What's the podcast? How can people start listening to you, Josh, consistently about that system?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's called Outer Spaces. We're on all the platforms. If you look, you can go to outerspacespodcast.com as well if you want to find a
Excellent.
quick RSS link directly over, or you can go to any Apple, Spotify, or they're everywhere. So it's the Outer Spaces podcast is the name.
Outer Spaces. So yeah, check that out. A lot of my listeners are in the construction space. They want to get into foreclosure flipping because they have the construction background. But the point
Yeah.
is, the flipping is designed to, as you mentioned, become a vehicle to produce other businesses or entities or buy
Yeah.
property to become more passive, right? So if they're already in the construction space, listening to you can help them to bolster that construction business. In Colorado, you nailed it. Like most of my bit market is in Colorado. It's very seasonal. Outdoor living is obviously, like as you mentioned, it's a luxury item, right? So
Yep.
when the market slows down a little bit, people are going to focus on other things. But obviously, when things are in boom time, it's very lucrative. I know that stuff is super expensive because it does require a taste for design and flair. And then you got to put
Mhm.
systems together, and that's where the cost really adds up. But when they're done, I can only imagine. What do you think an average outdoor living space runs right now? To really, when you dial it in for somebody, what does that cost now?
It depends on what they need, and we go through a very deep discovery process to uncover that. They
Okay.
can start at 50,000. They can go to 500,000 to 1 million, depending on what you want. It really depends. And ideally, if you're going to invest that kind of money in your home, it should be your forever home. If you're going to
That's
be
right.
out in 3 to 5 years,
I
don't
love
do
that.
it. Seriously, like we got our clients away from making bad decisions that are going to haunt them for years to come. So our goal is to guide them through a great discovery process so that they can figure out exactly what they need to move forward with full open heart and not regret. So we don't teach any kind of like sleazy sales or manipulative crap. Like that's not what it is. We're here to serve clients. We're here to serve our students and help them serve their clients better. Because when you go in with a service mindset, not a sales mindset, it changes the game. When you go in
Absolutely.
there knowing that a no is good, just as good as a yes, let's
Absolutely.
just let's discover that on a phone call and not after a 20-minute drive, though, right?
Right.
We like to do
Before it
everything
comes to
in
the
the
house,
office
we
and
do
then
that.
pre-qual and then go out.
Right, right. No, I
Yeah,
love that. And you're so right. And unfortunately, a lot of people in your industry don't feel that way. So you're rare in
yeah,
that space where people are they're trying to push the agenda of getting the sale. Obviously, taking that service industry thing is going to lead to higher ticket sales because you're a trusted advisor now, right? And
yep,
if somebody's
yep,
making a 50,000 to $500,000 decision on outdoor living space, they really want somebody they can work with. So I'm sure there's a
yep,
value in what you offer teaching that because it's proven to be successful for you. And having that system where you take them from the sales process to the implementation of that design is going to be humongous. So I really hope my listeners would take the time, go check out Outer Spaces and Josh, and really learn how to increase your construction business. Obviously, if you're doing foreclosure flipping to fund that enterprise or whatever, the opportunity is there to produce the capital like you did
mhm,
through real estate investing to then take that and move that into your construction business, which is where you are today. And that's the vision for my entire program. So I absolutely love that. Josh, we're
yeah.
kind of wrapping up on the show today. What parting thoughts, words of wisdom could you leave the listeners with about real estate or mindset or the construction business? What parting words can you offer today, please?
Well, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. Henry Ford said it best. So if
Amen.
this is, I know from my world is I want to make sure I want to make sure that when God pulls my ticket and says, "Brother, it's time to go," that my family is well taken care of and that they don't have to worry about anything like that. In order to do that, it was a matter of taking monies that could have been put into fun things and being disciplined to put it away to turn it into, cash flow producing assets. So now that discipline is paying off. The fruits are finally starting to come on the tree. And with that being the case, it allows me to also teach my two young sons how to do this too. So we can not just impact your life and make your life easier, but you're setting an example for your children for what the standard of expectation is in your bloodline. That is on you.
Absolutely. And failure is on you too, right? If you don't take the
Yep.
first step, if fear dictates I mean, obviously fear was not a factor for you. You stepped out there, you did what you had to do to get this thing built. And now here you are today and able to take that knowledge and transition to other people looking to get started in outdoor spaces, construction, and that space is huge and so rare. There's so little of that out there, So I think you're in a really particular niche. And I hope people will go and check out the Outer Spaces podcast. Josh, it's been absolutely a pleasure to have you on the show, man. You are energetic. I love hanging out with you. This has been awesome. Hope we can have you back on at some point down the road to see how you're doing in that business. And I hope a lot of listeners will tune into the Outer Spaces podcast and learn more about what you do specifically. Thanks for the time, buddy. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Donny.
Hey guys, you heard it. It's about the system. In the end, you want to find something that's going to work for you. It requires hustle. It requires pain. It requires dedication. But Josh put in the time and now he's consulting with other people on what he learned along the way. But he funded that enterprise with real estate investing, learning that process, getting the finding of deals, the analyzing of deals, the fixing of deals, the funding and the flipping into long hold rentals to turn into an operation that now gives back to people all across. I really hope you'll take the time to check out the Outer Spaces podcast and learn more about that. And if you're looking to find an income producing activity in foreclosure investing that can help change your family tree and provide the income that you need to create more passive income business, I hope you'll reach out and learn more about the foreclosure profit system that I developed to help you do just that. With that, this is Donny Coram, your foreclosure deals coach, thanking you so much for tuning in and reminding you now and always, don't buy a house, buy a deal.